Morning. I'm going to ask a bit about how the decision was made and identified. So in the current new Met for London plan, so phase 1, you had a target so it said Londoners will be able to easily contact us, whether by phone, digitally or face-to-face. Each borough will have at least one 24/7 counter. By April 2025 was the date. So obviously that was just kind of 3 months ago that date was meant to be met, and now you're planning to drastically reduce them. So I just wondered how that was originally put in the new Met for London 1.
Yeah, thank you. It's a really good question. We wrote the new Met for London plan before we realised the scale of the financial challenge. And it's only at the end of last year that we realised that there would be a £260 million hole in the Met's budget. The new Met for London plan was started a long time before that and agreed. So I totally accept, and it's with regret, one of our commitments in the new Met for London plan was to have a front counter in every London borough. We can no longer afford to do that. And we're making the tough choices to prioritise what we think is most important, which is more officers in neighbourhood policing, working in local communities, in wards, more town centre teams dealing with retail crime.
Yeah, and I appreciate the alternatives that you've looked at, but I really want to understand kind of the frame of making that decision. Obviously, 260 million is quite a big gap to have suddenly identified. So I just wondered how the budget was, when you made the new Met for London 1, how you foresaw what the budget was going to look like over that period. And yeah, I'll ask that question, then I'll ask my next one.
So I don't think we could have foreseen that when 2 years ago, when New Met for London 1 was written, that the scale of the gap was going to be as big as it is at the end of sort of 2024. So New Met for London 1 was sort of end of 22, start of 23. The budget that we're talking about now is for next year, which is April 26. And there's that scale of gap. We couldn't have foreseen that.
So what caused the gap then? So in making the new Net for London 1, where you thought you had this budget, so you made a plan. So I used to do this in the NHS. You make the plan based on the budget that you've got, and then you try and deliver it. But the aim of that was to deliver it a few months ago. So you must have known at the beginning of new Met for London 1, you must have foreseen wanting to deliver it. So it's just how you then identified that, like what changed in finding that big gap of funding?
Well, the funding settlement.
So then how have you reviewed everything in the plan? So I know that we've had many conversations about the decision-making around these choices. Have you got a document set out where you've put what you've achieved and what you haven't achieved of the new Met for London 1? Has that gone to MOPAC? Does that go to the London Policing Board? It obviously doesn't come to us at committee, because obviously you've developed the new Met for London phase 2. So I'd really like to see, this bit's been achieved, this hasn't been achieved before this new Met for London 2.
So very much so. I mean, one of the things that we're doing right now as we're thinking for new Met for London 2 is going through a process of what has been achieved and what hasn't. And there's been an enormous amount done in terms of turning the organisation around, in terms of our crime performance, in terms of our investment in areas that are most important to Londoners, neighbourhoods, public protection, maintaining response, improving investigations, and the performance dividend from that is starting to come now, where we're seeing 15% reduction or maybe 16% reduction in neighbourhood crime.
But is that set out in a so obviously the new Met for London 1's got like the headline of 3 bullet points and then the date. So is there another document where you've got like an action plan on a spreadsheet where it's rag rated? We've done green here, amber here, red here. Obviously the counters are closed, so that one would be red. Like, does that exist as a document? Because obviously to deliver the new Met for London 2, I'd expect there to be that kind of scrutiny on what has and hasn't been achieved.
I think that's completely fair, and I think that's entirely our intention, is that as we launch new Met for London 2, we will have a review and look at that, each of those points in new Met for London 1 to decide, one, is it unachievable? As in this case, circumstances in terms of our budget have changed very significantly, so we cannot achieve what we promised in new Met for London 1 in relation to front counters. 2, is it something that we think is achievable? So we're going to continue with the effort into new Met for London 2. And then 3, what new? We've achieved such a huge amount, but what else do we want to do for the next 2 years?
But it would have been helpful to have seen that alongside, because obviously you've published new Met for London 2, so it would have been helpful to have seen that like a proper rag-rated document, so, you know, the red, amber, green document that goes alongside Met for London 2, so people can go, oh, OK, so this bit's been achieved, this hasn't been achieved. Because obviously you've got kind of data at the beginning about crime and other bits and pieces, but what I want to see is phase 1, 80% of what we set out to do was done, 20% wasn't, like a real transparent, because what I worry about is how can we trust that New Met for London 2 and anything it says if 3 months after a target in New Met for London 1, it just gets completely taken away?
So it's a fair challenge. I think it's important to know, and again, we've been working through this now, the vast majority of our commitments in New Met for London 1 have been achieved. What you're saying is, I'd like to see a document that points that out. The New Met for London 2 document's been circulated for consultation, so we want feedback on it before it's sort of formally published. And absolutely, as part of that, I think it's right that we point out where we've achieved everything that we have in terms of our performance, our investment in priority areas, and really turning the organisation around in New Met for London 1. It is important to note that there may be a very small number of things, the front counters being one of them, that we've, due to circumstances, in this case, beyond our control, in terms of budget, that we may not be able to achieve, and we'll be open and honest with that.
I just want to come back on the decision in terms of any qualities impact assessment that has been undertaken regarding this change. Obviously, that's one of the biggest concerns that I'm sure a number of Assembly members share in terms of, I know that you said there's only 5% of the crimes reported through the front desk, but obviously for those people who are reporting, it might be the only way that they can. So I'm thinking of, obviously, people disabled access, people with digital exclusion, but also people who can't report a crime because of a coercive relationship where they may be monitoring their phone, etc. So I'm just, wondering if that equalities impact has been completed and what that showed.
Yeah, so it's ongoing, and I'll just cover 3 sort of core points to this in terms of how did we decide, then what does the demographic show, and then what does the EIA show. So in terms of, there are 3 factors in terms of looking at which front counters will remain open and which we would look to close. The first one is front counter demand, because obviously there's a massive variance between the busier front counters and those that are much quieter, some of whom may see 1 or 2 people in an entire shift. The geographic spread is also important, and that's weighted, because obviously inner and outer London have different demands, so we want sort of those that remain open, we want to be spread as equally geographically as possible. And then there's accessibility and operational alignment to things like custody suites and investigative teams, because they tend to drive significant demand and access requirements. In terms of the demographic of people using front counters, just looking at the crime data, and again, it varies hugely from, and I'm not going to go into individual examples, but I could do as to how many crimes are reported per day.
Yeah, I'm aware of the time too.
But sort of 7.8% of our contact in front counters is by people over 65. The gender split's about 50-50. The general population in terms of ethnicity is split broadly in line with sort of London demographics. The equality impact assessment is really important. It's going to build on one that was done sort of some time ago now in 2017, when previously some front counters were closed. And we're undertaking that as with representative groups to understand and evaluate the full impact. I think it's important to know as well, though, that there's impact whatever we do here. So, of course, there are people for whom front counters may be the only point of access, but equally there are people for whom police attending and seeing them in the community is the only point of access. Yeah,
and I think the point is just how are you looking at the impact, and it's good that you're speaking to representative groups and then making sure that they're aware of the different routes of, being able to report crime to, officers. But I'm going to go back to the chair just because of time. Thank you.